The rain was coming, and then he is in hand and he moved fast through the parking structure soaked through. Keys already in hand, 12 minutes to cover 3 miles to Lucas's school. But right outside the built entrance, he saw her, a woman down on the curb, blood seeping through an expensive sleeve, her shoulder against the concrete edge where a sedan had clipped her and kept going. No one stopped. Owen had no time. He knelt down anyway. He called the ambulance, shielded her from the rain with his own jacket, stayed until her eyes opened. She looked at him like she was memorizing a face. A few hours later, Owen walked into his office building and went completely still when she walked into the conference room and sat down at the head of the table. What would you do if a single moment of kindness rewrote everything you thought your life was going to be? Owen Carter was 32 years old, and he looked it not in the soft way that meant youth, but in the way that meant work. There were calluses on his palms, thick enough to catch on fabric. His hands knew the insides of electrical panels, the way some men knew scripture. His forearms carried faint silver scars from a pipe fitting that had gone wrong 3 years ago, before he'd transferred to the maintenance division of Harrove Industrial Solutions downtown headquarters. He wasn't tall, but he moved through the building as though he were shorter than he was, head slightly down, shoulders drawn in, taking up only the space he absolutely needed. It was a posture learned over years of being told, in 100 small ways, that he was in the way. He had not always been a maintenance worker. Once, briefly, he had been something closer to what he might have become. At 20, he'd enrolled in the electrical engineering program at State. He'd been good at it, genuinely good, the kind of student professors notice, but by 22, his mother had gotten sick, and his then-girlfriend Claire had gotten pregnant, and the math of his life had rearranged itself without asking his permission. He'd taken the first steady job he could find. He told himself it was temporary. That had been 10 years ago. The divorce had come 4 years after Lucas was born, quiet and inevitable, the way most failures are. Claire had moved north. Lucas had stayed. Owen had no bitterness about the arrangement, only a specific, practiced kind of tiredness he carried the way other men carried wallets. He shared a 2-bedroom apartment on Garfield Avenue with his son, a second-hand couch, and a small whiteboard on the refrigerator where they tracked the week. Tuesday, dentist. Thursday, soccer. Friday, dad cooks. The apartment was clean in the way that only a single father, with no time and high standards, keeps a place, nothing excessive, everything in its assigned location. Lucas's drawings taped above the radiator in an imperfect gallery that Owen had never once considered taking down. At Harrove, Owen was invisible in the way useful things often are. He fixed what broke. He arrived before anyone asked and finished before anyone noticed. He knew the building systems better than the engineers who had installed them, knew which breaker on the 14th floor ran hot in summer, knew that the HVAC on the east side of the building needed its pressure bleed valve touched every 3rd Tuesday, or it would complain loudly and expensively by Wednesday morning. None of this knowledge was noted in his personnel file. His personnel file noted that he was a grade 3 maintenance technician with satisfactory performance reviews and no escalation incidents in 27 months. His direct supervisor was a man named Hunter Briggs, and Hunter had made it his particular project to ensure that Owen understood his place. Hunter was 38, had a management certificate from an online program he mentioned often, and had never once, as far as Owen could determine, fixed anything with his own hands. He assigned Owen the worst shifts, the lowest floors, the jobs that required crawling into spaces no one else wanted to enter. When Owen solved a problem faster than expected, Hunter logged the outcome without credit and presented the resolution at departmental meetings as a team success, meaning Hunter's success, with Owen as a nameless instrument in the background. Owen had never complained. He'd thought about it. He drafted the conversation in his head during long Tuesday nights when Lucas was asleep and the apartment was quiet. But he always arrived at the same conclusion. Complaining required energy, and energy was a finite resource. And every unit he spent on Hunter Briggs was a unit he couldn't spend on his son. So he kept his head down and his opinions private and did the work, because the work, at least, was honest. That Tuesday evening, he did not yet know that everything was about to change. He only knew that it was raining, and he was late, and Lucas was waiting. He was 2 blocks from the school when he saw her. The intersection at 5th and Merchant was one of those mid-city crossings that gets slick when it rains, drainage never quite right. The painted lines worn to ghosts, taxis cutting corners like they own the coordinates. Owen was slowing for a red light when he caught the movement in his peripheral vision. A figure at the crosswalk, stepping off the curb, and then a black sedan accelerating through an amber signal that had already gone red, and the figure going down. Not violently, not the way it looks in movies. She simply went down, one moment standing, the next crumpled against the curb, her shoulder hitting the raised concrete edge as the sedan's side mirror clipped her and kept moving. Owen was out of the car before the light changed. He moved through the rain at a run, his work bag still on the passenger seat, keys still in the ignition. The intersection traffic had slowed to rubberneck and then resumed. No one stopped. A woman on the sidewalk pulled out her phone to call for help or to document. Owen couldn't tell, and then pocketed it again and walked on. 3 other pedestrians crossed to the opposite side of the street, with the focused indifference of people who have decided that something is not their problem. She was dressed in a way that registered even through the rain and the urgency. A structured blazer. Charcoal gray, soaked now and pushed up at one shoulder where she'd impacted the curb. Dark trousers, low heels, one of which had come half off. A leather portfolio bag still strapped across her body. Her left arm was braced at an angle that looked painful, and where her sleeve had ridden up near the elbow, a gash was bleeding freely. Watered down by rain but still vivid. Still real. She was conscious. Her eyes were open, dark, sharp, slightly unfocused in the way of someone reassessing after shock. She looked up at him without speaking. He pressed 2 fingers gently to the inside of her wrist to check her pulse steady. A little fast, and then pulled off his own work shirt without pausing, leaving himself in the white undershirt beneath. He folded the shirt once, pressed it carefully to the cut on her arm, and looked at her face again. "Can you tell me your name?" She blinked. "Sophia." Her voice was steadier than he expected. "Sophia Hale." "Sophia. I'm Owen. You're going to be okay. I'm calling for an ambulance right now." He made the call with one hand, keeping the folded shirt against her arm with the other. The dispatcher asked him to stay on the line. He did. Around him, the rain continued, and the city went on with its business, and he stayed where he was, kneeling on wet asphalt, his shirt turning dark red at one corner. She watched him the entire time. Not the darting, uncertain look of someone in distress, scanning for escape. A steady, deliberate watching, the kind of look that files things away. "You don't have to stay," she said, once he'd ended the call with the dispatcher. "Yes, I do," Owen said. It wasn't heroism. It was just the only thing that was true. He had taken his jacket from the car, a battered canvas field jacket, not quite waterproof but better than nothing, and draped it over her shoulders before she could argue. He held the shirt against her arm and kept talking in the even, low voice he used with Lucas after nightmares. Not about anything important. About the intersection, about the one-way system in this part of the city, about how the drainage on 5th had been reported 3 times and never fixed. Small talk deployed like a tool, designed to keep her present and grounded while they waited. She winced once when he had to adjust the pressure on her arm. He apologized. She said it was fine. He said it probably wasn't. But it would be. The ambulance arrived in 8 minutes. As the paramedics took over, Owen stood and stepped back, giving them room. Sophia Hale followed him with her eyes the moment she was settled on the stretcher. She reached out with her uninjured hand and caught his wrist, not grasping, just touching. Briefly, as though registering something. "Your name," she said. "Owen what?" "Carter," he said. She nodded once. Her lips moved fractionally, not quite a smile but something adjacent to it. The expression of someone who has decided to remember. "Thank you, Owen Carter," he nodded back. "You're welcome, Sophia Hale." One of the paramedics asked if he was accompanying the patient. He hesitated. The clock in his head counted the distance to Lucas's school, and found it impossible. "No," he said. "I can't." He watched the ambulance leave. Then he got back in his car, hands still faintly red at the edges, jacket gone, shirt gone, the cold rain making itself felt through his thin undershirt. He drove the remaining blocks to Lucas's school with the heat on full, and his jaw set, and his mind doing the specific calculation it always did after moments like this. Not whether he had done the right thing, but what it was going to cost him. Lucas was the last child in the after-school room. He sat at one of the small tables with a drawing in front of him, a house with a red door, and a garden that bore no relationship to their actual apartment. And when Owen walked in, The boy looked up with the expression every child holds in reserve for the exact moment a parent is late, not quite accusatory, but pointed. "Sorry, buddy." Owen crouched to his son's level. There was someone who needed help. Lucas considered this with the seriousness that 6-year-olds apply to matters of moral importance. "Did you help them?" "Yeah." "Okay." Lucas collected his drawing and his backpack, and took his father's hand as though the case were closed, because as far as he was concerned it was. They walked out together into the rain that had already begun to ease. Owen did not think about Sophia Hale again that night. He thought about Lucas's fever that had broken the week before, and whether it was fully gone. He thought about the grocery list on the refrigerator whiteboard, and the fact that Tuesday was soccer. He made dinner pasta with sauce from a jar, Lucas's preferred, and they sat together at the small kitchen table while Lucas talked without stopping about a boy at school who could wiggle his ears, which Lucas found the greatest achievable skill a human being could possess. Owen listened with complete attention, because complete attention was the thing he had that cost nothing. By 9 o'clock, Lucas was asleep. Owen sat at the kitchen table for 20 minutes in the quiet, looking at nothing, feeling the specific weight of a day lived entirely in service to other people. Then he went to bed. He set his alarm for 5:45. The world outside was the same as it had been the day before. Nothing had shifted. Or so he believed. The building had a specific energy that morning. He noticed it the way he noticed mechanical things, a change in ambient sound, a slight wrongness in the rhythm of how people moved through the lobby. He registered it and moved on. At 9 o'clock, the company-wide intercom system made an announcement. Brief, delivered in the voice of the executive floor coordinator, with the particular flatness of prepared remarks. Harrove Industrial Solutions was pleased to confirm that CEO Sophia Hale had returned to the office following a minor personal incident the previous afternoon. She would be addressing the senior staff and division heads in the third-floor conference room at 9:30. Owen was in the electrical corridor on the second floor, on his back beneath a raised panel junction, when he heard the announcement through the speaker overhead. He stopped moving. He lay there for a moment with his hand resting on a cable bundle, and his eyes fixed on the underside of the panel above him. And he ran the name through his mind once. Sophia Hale. He pulled himself out from under the panel, and sat on the cold floor of the corridor, and did not move for several seconds. He had no reason to be standing at the glass wall of the conference room at 9:28, looking through it at the assembled row of Hargrove's division heads, Hunter Briggs among them, already arranged around the oval table, with the posture of men who believed the room was built for them. But he was there, holding his toolbox at his side, watching the door at the far end of the room open. She walked in without ceremony. Dark blazer, lighter than the one she'd been wearing yesterday. Her left arm carried a bandage beneath the sleeve, faint but visible to someone who knew to look. Her stride carried the particular quality of someone who does not enter a room and wonder if she belongs in it. She took her position at the head of the table and set down her portfolio without looking at the assembled faces. Then she looked up. Her gaze traveled along the length of the table and then, without apparent reason, moved to the glass wall, to the maintenance technician standing there with a toolbox in his hand. She stopped, recognition, clean and certain. And beneath it, something that might have been, in another set of circumstances, the beginning of a smile. She held his gaze for exactly 3 seconds. Then she turned back to the room and began speaking. Owen walked back down the stairs to the second floor. He finished the junction work. He submitted his report by 11:50. He did not tell anyone what he had seen. At 2:15, the floor coordinator on the executive level, a woman named Diane who had always said thank you in the manner of someone who meant it, came down to the second floor and found Owen in the equipment bay. "Mr. Carter, Miss Hale would like to see you." Third floor. Hunter Briggs was in the hallway when Owen came out of the elevator. "Whatever she says, you handle it carefully. This is a delicate situation." "You understand what I mean." "I understand what you said," Owen replied, which was not the same thing. Hunter's eyes narrowed for a moment before he rearranged his face into something more neutral. Sophia's office was large but not ostentatious floor-to-ceiling windows along the east wall, a desk that was wide and clear and held almost nothing. The city spread out behind her in afternoon light, and she stood at the edge of her desk rather than behind it, arms crossed loosely, watching him enter. The bandage on her left arm was visible at the edge of her sleeve. "You didn't tell me you worked here," she said. It was not an accusation. "You didn't ask," Owen said. A pause. Something moved across her expression that might have been appreciation. "No," she agreed. "I didn't." She gestured to one of the chairs. He sat. She took the other. "I want to thank you properly." "You already did. On a wet sidewalk while I was bleeding through your shirt. That doesn't count." Owen almost said it was fine. He stopped himself. "How's your arm?" "6 stitches. Nothing serious." She said it without drama. "What I have not had before is someone pull over in traffic, give me their jacket, and stay with me for 8 minutes in the rain while they were clearly in a hurry to be somewhere else." "Where were you going?" "To pick up my son from school." Something shifted in her face, not sentimentality, but a recalibration, an updating of the picture. "How old?" "6." She nodded slowly. Then, "Owen, I don't know you, which is something I'm going to say plainly so you know I'm aware of it. I'm not going to treat this like I do, but what you did yesterday wasn't small, and I don't intend to treat it like it was." Owen looked at her for a long moment. He had grown up in a world where powerful people said things like that as a prelude to doing nothing at all. He did not know which kind of person Sophia Hale was yet. "Thank you," he said. It was neither acceptance nor refusal, just acknowledgement. She walked him to the door. In the hallway outside, Hunter Briggs was gone. Owen walked back to the elevator alone and rode down in the specific silence of a man who has just had a conversation he is not yet sure how to classify. Word traveled the way it always does in buildings where people have too little to do with their attention, fast, in distorted pieces, with editorial commentary already baked in. By 3 o'clock it was general knowledge that the maintenance technician on the second floor had been the one to help the CEO after her accident. The specific coloring applied to this fact varied depending on the teller. "Convenient," said a woman from accounts receivable named Patricia, to no one in particular and everyone in earshot. "You don't just happen to be in the right place." A man named Greg, who worked in logistics and whose primary relationship with Owen consisted of nodding at him in the elevator, now felt sufficiently informed to form and share opinions. "I'm just saying," Greg told 2 colleagues near the coffee machine, "that some people see an opportunity." Owen heard some of this and didn't hear the rest, and in either case it settled on him with the same weightlessness it always did. He had been in environments where people talked about him since he was 22. He had learned that you could not defend yourself against implication. You could only work, and wait, and let the record accumulate. Hunter, however, was not content to let implication do the work alone. He began a quiet campaign, executed with the particular skill of someone who has spent years in middle management learning, which levers to pull without leaving fingerprints. He shifted Owen's shift assignments, so that Owen was consistently absent from the floors where executive-level staff circulated. He began logging minor anomalies in Owen's work record, slight delays, tools left in the wrong bay, reports submitted within the deadline but flagged as borderline. Nothing that could be disputed individually. Everything that could add up. In 2 separate conversations with the facilities director, a well-meaning but overwhelmed man named Carl Hunter raised concerns about Owen's professional demeanor following the CEO interaction. "I'm not saying he did anything wrong," Hunter said, in the tone of a man who is absolutely saying that. "I just want to make sure we're monitoring the situation appropriately." Owen was not informed that these conversations were occurring. He found out, as he found out most things about the building's political ecosystem, through the accumulated small signals that come with paying attention. Meanwhile, Sophia watched. She was not demonstrative about it. She did not summon Owen to her floor again or make a public show of interest in his work. But she had arrived at her position by doing 2 things consistently: making decisions based on what she actually saw, rather than what she was told, and paying close attention to the gap between those 2 things. She had learned to read the distance between what the reports said and what the building actually was. What the building actually was, on the maintenance level, was a single competent man covering for a system of profound organizational mediocrity. She had learned this through the maintenance logs specifically, through the pattern of incidents resolved without escalation, which clustered almost entirely around one employee's shift pattern. She made no announcements about this. She noted it. She kept watching. The technical crisis came on a Wednesday morning, from a sector of the building that had been flagged in Owen's private notes which no one read because no one had asked for them for 14 months. The Harrove headquarters building ran its data infrastructure on a hybrid power distribution system designed in the 1990s and upgraded piecemeal over the following decades. The result was a system that functioned adequately under normal conditions but carried a structural vulnerability at the point where the legacy grid interfaced with the newer capacity expansion. Every competent electrical technician who had worked in the building had eventually noticed this. Most had noted it, been ignored, and moved on. Owen had done what those technicians had not. He had mapped it. Not in an official report. Because official reports required sign-off from Hunter, Owen had mapped it in a small notebook he kept in his locker. Using the working knowledge of electrical theory he had begun accumulating at age 20 and never quite stopped applying. When the system began exhibiting the first symptoms of cascading load failure at 847 tripping breakers on the 7th and 9th floors, generating emergency tickets that went to every manager in the building, the response was immediate, loud, and entirely ineffective. The engineering team Harrove kept on retainer arrived with equipment and credentials and the confident body language of people who bill by the hour. They ran diagnostics for 90 minutes. They proposed a solution that Owen, watching from the hallway, recognized immediately as a workaround that would delay the actual failure by approximately 3 weeks. He said nothing. He went back to his work bay. At 12:15, the workaround failed. The 9th floor lost power entirely. The 7th went intermittent. The facilities director, Carl, appeared in the primary electrical room, looking genuinely frightened, and Hunter Briggs was somewhere behind him doing the particular kind of loud nothing that is the signature of a man covering his tracks in real time. Owen was back at the primary electrical room entrance before Carl finished his sentence. "Does anyone have any actual ideas?" Carl said, to the room generally, with the desperate candor of a man who has run out of institutional options. Owen raised his hand. Not enthusiastically, just raised it. Every face in the room turned toward him, with the expression that a grade 3 maintenance technician reliably receives when he raises his hand in a room full of engineers. Polite doubt, lightly coated in condescension. "Walk us through it," Sophia said. She had appeared from the back of the room at some point in the last 2 minutes, standing near the wall with her arms crossed and her weight even on both feet and her attention absolutely fixed on him. With no apology in her face for the engineers and no deference to the hierarchy that had just failed, Owen took a breath. Then he started talking. He explained the interface fault specifically, the sector of the distribution panel, where the 1994 grid architecture was carrying load, designed for a system 3 times its capacity at that junction. He explained the compensation pattern he had mapped, how the system had been self-correcting for over a year, and how that self-correction created a predictable oscillation in the load profile that would, under the current building occupancy and server demand, hit a failure threshold. He said none of this with particular drama. He said it the way a man says something he has known for a long time and has waited to be asked about. The senior engineer began nodding partway through. Not in agreement, exactly. In recognition. "How do you fix it?" Sophia asked. Owen told her. It would require a temporary load redistribution across 4 junctions, a manual override of 2 legacy relays, and a rebalancing of the interface buffers, interface buffer roughly 40 minutes with the right equipment and 2 people who knew what they were doing. Then a proper structural replacement of the interface sector, which had been needed for a decade and would cost the company a fraction of what the outages and mitigation patches had cost in aggregate. The room was very quiet when he finished. Sophia looked at him for a moment, with an expression that was not quite surprise. Something more careful than that, the look of someone who has been watching a picture develop and has just seen the final image come clear. "Can you verify what he's described?" she asked the senior engineer. The engineer looked at Owen, then at his own tablet, then at Owen again. "In broad strokes," he said. "Yes. Then let's implement it." She looked at Carl. "Clear the room except for Mr. Carter and whoever he needs." Hunter, who had been standing near the door with the expression of a man watching his narrative control evaporate in real time, made one attempt. "Sophia, with respect, we should probably run this through the standard review process before. The 9th floor has been dark for 47 minutes, she said, without turning her head. "What would you like to review?" Hunter did not answer. Owen fixed the junction. It took 38 minutes, not 40. He worked with the senior engineer, who turned out, once the formalities and billing rates were set aside, to be a competent man perfectly willing to follow a better solution when he encountered one. They worked efficiently and without unnecessary conversation. And when the 9th floor came back online, and the alarm stopped, and the building exhaled its collective relief, Owen replaced the panel cover, collected his tools, and stood up. The senior engineer looked at him. "Where did you study?" "State," Owen said. "Electrical engineering." 2 years. The engineer nodded slowly. "You should have finished." Owen picked up his toolbox. "I know. What happened next happened quickly, which is often how institutional reality shifts when the right person decides it should." Hunter Briggs had submitted his informal concerns about Owen to the facilities director in written form, a mistake, as it turned out, because written things exist and can be reviewed. When Sophia reviewed them, she did so in a room with Hunter present and with Carl and the HR director, asking Hunter to account for each item, while the record of Owen's actual performance sat in a parallel column on her screen. Hunter was a skilled political operator. He was not skilled enough for a direct conversation with someone who had already read everything. The meeting lasted 40 minutes. At the end of it, Hunter was assigned to a formal performance review and stripped of direct management authority over the maintenance division. Pending the review's outcome, he left the building that afternoon without stopping at the 2nd floor. Owen did not see him go. He only noticed, gradually, over the following days, that a specific kind of pressure had been removed, the way a low persistent sound disappears, and you only register its absence after the fact. Owen was not in the meeting. He found out about its conclusion the following morning, when Carl came down to the 2nd floor with the slightly dazed expression of someone recalibrating their organizational map. "There's going to be some restructuring," Carl said. "Miss Hale is creating a facilities engineering coordinator role, reporting directly to the operations director, not through the maintenance management chain. The job description was written this morning." Carl paused. "I was asked to bring this to you before it's posted." Owen read the description. It matched, with uncomfortable precision, the work he had been doing informally for 3 years. "Is this," he started. "It's a real position," Carl said. "Salary band, benefits, the full thing." He looked at Owen with the expression of a man who is slightly embarrassed that it took this long. "She wanted me to make sure you understood it's yours on the basis of what you've demonstrated, not as a not because of anything else." Owen looked at the paper for a moment. He thought about Lucas at the kitchen table, asking whether he had helped the person. He thought about the whiteboard on the refrigerator and the soccer game on Thursday. He thought about the notebook in his locker and the 14 months of maps no one had asked to see. "Tell her yes," he said. He went to get Lucas from school that afternoon at the normal time, the rain entirely gone, the city in the particular amber light of late afternoon in early fall. Lucas came out of the building still talking about the ear-wiggling boy, and Owen crouched to his level and listened with the same complete attention he always gave. And they walked to the car together, and Lucas asked what was for dinner, and Owen said he was thinking of actually cooking tonight, not jar sauce, and Lucas said that was acceptable as long as there was cheese. They were in the parking lot when Owen heard his name. He looked up. Sophia Hale was standing at the edge of the parking area, out of place in this context, and aware of it. The contained quality of her usual expression slightly loosened by something he didn't have a word for yet. She was carrying a folder. Her bandaged arm was at her side. She looked for the first time since he'd seen her at the head of that conference table, like someone standing somewhere without the script she usually carried. "I wanted to return this," she said, and held out the folder. Inside was a check for the work shirt and jacket he'd left with the paramedics. He looked at it, then at her. "You didn't have to. I also wanted to say," she continued, as though he hadn't spoken, "that what happened this week, the position, the restructuring, none of that was a favor." She said it carefully, with the precision of someone who has thought about how to say it. "What you fixed on Wednesday, you already knew. You've known it for a long time." The building just wasn't ready to listen. Owen held the folder. Lucas was standing beside him, looking up at Sophia Hale with the frank, unguarded curiosity of a child who has not yet learned to modulate his attention. "Are you the lady my dad helped?" Lucas asked. Sophia looked down at him. Something changed in her face, a genuine thing, not performed. "Yes," she said. "I am." Lucas considered this. "Was he nice?" "He was very nice," she said. Lucas nodded with great satisfaction. as though this confirmed something he had never doubted. He took his father's hand and began moving toward the car. The matter apparently settled to his complete satisfaction. Owen looked at Sophia Hale over his son's head. She was watching them, the small figure pulling his father toward the car, the father following with an expression that was not quite a smile but occupied the same territory. Something that held in it the specific warmth of a person seeing something clearly for the first time and deciding that they like what they see. Owen nodded once. She nodded back. He put Lucas in the car and started the engine and pulled out into the amber afternoon, and he did not look back, not because there was nothing to look back at, but because for the first time in a long time, what was ahead of him felt more interesting than what was behind. Some things change slowly, through accumulated pressure and the grinding patience of years. And some things change in the span of a single Tuesday evening, in the rain, at an intersection on 5th and Merchant, because a tired man with calloused hands and no particular reason to stop decided, without deliberation, to stop anyway. The building hummed. The 9th floor stayed lit. Lucas fell asleep by 8:30, and in a clean apartment on Garfield Avenue, Owen Carter sat at the kitchen table with his son's drawings above the radiator and a new job description printed on the table in front of him, and felt for the first time in longer than he could clearly remember that the space around him was exactly the right size.